Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Other Side Chronicles. I'm your host, Stephen Sherrick, and I live right here in the heart of the weird and wonderful little settlement known as Burien, Washington. But I was born and raised in the shadows of the Ozark Mountains of Missouri and Arkansas, where the hills hold secrets and the nights are filled with whispers. Pull up your rocking chair and pour yourself a strong cup of whatever brew might comfort you. Then lean in close, because these stories we're telling don't wait for the light of day. Welcome to the Other Side Chronicles. And so it begins, y'all. Hey, everyone. Hey, friends and kinfolk. Welcome back to the Other Side Chronicles. Good to have you here back at the Heritage Highline Museum. I'm in studio today, and I'm just really excited for my special guest today, Lisa Martin, who comes from the hills from where I come from, which is even a little more exciting. We've talked a little bit about on the show about the hills of the Ozarks, where I used to hang out, and Lisa comes straight from that part of the world. So I'm so happy to have her here. Excited. We're gonna be talking a little bit today about a phenomenon that I grew up with. That was part of my family's. It was what we did. It was part of what we did. We went to the drive-in theaters, and we went to the Spooklight, and so we're gonna be talking about the Spooklight. And first, I wanted to introduce Lisa, and I'm gonna do a quick introduction here because it could go on for a bit, but. And please, Lisa, let me know if I leave out anything, and I'm going to let you talk a little bit about what you do and why you do it. But I have just a list of attorney, author, historian, folklorist, podcaster, tour guide. Does that hit a lot of them there?
That hits most of them. It does. And thank you for having me. Excited to be here and talking about one of our favorite subjects.
Yeah, yeah. So, and you, and I think you've written at least four books,
Yep.
all which I could totally take off on. Haunted Joplin, which is where I went to school. Um, Civil War Ghosts of Southwest Missouri. You notice I say Missouri. I get corrected on that from folks all the time that live in Missouri. Um,
No, well, they're from Kansas City or St. Louis, or they're implants
exactly.
because
Haunted Carthage, which was where my grandparents were from and spent many a day in Carthage. The Wicked Route of Route 66. Um, and then I think there's some books actually that you're doing or done around the Spooklight. Is that correct?
have one in progress. It should be dropping. It'll be dropping later this year, and um, another one I'm working on currently is about the first spree killer in America, Billy Cook, who was from Joplin, Missouri.
Oh, wow. Okay. And so there's a couple of other things. So tell me a little bit about Dark Ozarks and also about the Paranormal Science Lab. Tell me a little bit about those two projects.
Okay, well, Paranormal Science Lab started close to 20 years ago now. Some mutual friends. We were professionals in various fields, from lawyers to the medical field to electricians, mechanics, etc., getting together and being interested in the paranormal. Over time, it has moved towards a group that we mainly work with historic sites to help them fundraise, public education, and to get kids into history. Although we do private investigations still, but not nearly as many. And so that's been going on for about 20 years. Common question I get on that is, what got you started? And I did live on I grew up on a farm outside of Joplin that was the site of a 6-day Civil War battle. And there were things that happened there that piqued interest, and soon learned that, well, things do happen in places, but you grow up, go off to school, etc., and that's not on your mind. So fast forward many years, and I come back to the area, and my ex-husband and I were looking at a house to buy, and it was in town in Webb City, where I actually went to school. And we were looking at this house. It was a beautiful arts and crafts home, turn of the century, and we were there with the real estate agent. We'd all been upstairs. The agent and I come downstairs, and it had a switchback staircase in the living room, switched back 4 times, very beautiful. She and I are standing there talking, and I've got numbers in my head, things like that. And I noticed that my husband starts coming down the stairs, and he'd take a step or two and stop. Take a step or two and stop and look over his shoulder. And I'm looking at him like, what are you doing? She's going to think you're nuts. And he finally gets down to the living room and says, did you guys hear that? And we're like, no. And he kind of shakes it off. So later, we're down in the basement, and it has a big central room and big, thick stone walls, foundation walls, and the old boiler's still sitting there. And they
Sounds
kind of
like a
walk
horror
over.
movie, like,
Oh,
going to the basement. Don't go to the basement, Lisa. Don't go to the basement.
well, they walk off towards the side room, and I'm just staying there for a second, kind of just observing. And I have the distinct sensation, and I mean dry ice, cold sensation of a thumb being laid across one side of my neck, and 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers on the other side. So it's as if a hand is clutching my throat. And then the cold going through my neck and out the back. And I thought, I'm not sure I want to do my laundry down here. So I walk over to the room that my husband and the agent had walked into, and look in, and I hear the agent say, now, I'm not sure what this room would have been used for. And I look in, one wall is all old apothecary cabinets. One wall is the largest 7, and I do mean 7, stainless steel sinks that you can imagine, and a huge, huge drain in the cement floor. And I just said, I'll tell you what it was. It was the embalming room. And I turn around and start towards the stairs, and I can still hear her stiletto heels, coming after me. And so she goes, I guess I should tell you this was a mortuary in the 1920s and 30s. And I said, yeah, I figured that one out. And over time, ironically, we bought a house a block and a half away. So, and have been here since, 25 years now. And so over time, you notice no one lives there very long. And it's like, yeah, I get that idea. And I would find myself, and I'm not, it's fun, even investigating everything. People, the public often will say, don't you get scared of anything, because nothing seems to rattle me. But when I walk the neighborhood unconsciously, and I've noticed other people do it too, you tend to walk across the street and walk on the other side of the street. As you walk past that house, you just feel something watching you. But you can't really put it into words. Mm-hmm. So years later, we are doing an event at a historic building in Carthage, Missouri. Mm-hmm. And we had taken a little bit of a break, and I hear a couple talking, and they start talking about, do you remember when so-and-so had that house in Webb City? And I kind of perk up. And they say enough that I realize they're talking about that house. And so I asked them about it, and it turned out someone in their family had owned that house back in the 70s, and that there was activity to the point that it got active enough And the kids got scared enough that one night they said that it was an aunt and uncle, I believe, uh, that the aunt had something she felt chase her down the hallway, and so they packed up and left and sold the house. And it's like, yeah, that tracks. So it was that experience, though, that made me get back into really thinking about it. I'm interested in why these things happen. We know that things happen in places, but why? So that's where it started.
Yeah.
And if you had told me back then I would be writing books and doing tours and all these things, I would have probably laughed because I did not see that one coming.
Well, that was, I could feel the hair stand up on the back of my neck as you were telling that story for sure. And I'm guessing because my ex-wife's from Webb City, I probably have seen that house before, I'm guessing. So I'll have to check.
Probably.
Yeah. Um, so, so, what's, a little bit about Dark Ozarks?
Dark Ozarks kind of grew out of of things that I was doing with books and speaking engagements and PSL, to focus on the noir history and legends of the Ozarks region.
Okay.
And it kind of developed over time. We had conferences that on the mysterious four states, and there was enough interest that we went this route. And so it focuses around the podcast. There's also a website, and we're on the different socials,
Mhm.
and then starting to do a line of Dark Ozarks books. And it's just really fun. And I think that one thing that people don't always think about is, obviously people are storytellers, and we always have been. And our stories, even the dark ones, I mean, we're fascinated by mysteries and dark folklore, etc. It is part of how we define ourselves, including as a region, and whether that's region is here or anywhere.
Right.
And that's what got us going. And it's been amazing fun. And we're to the point that we, have about 500,000 listeners a month, and over 200,000 followers on different
Wow.
platforms. So
Right.
it's fun.
So I'm crossing off the question. Do you believe in ghosts? Parsing that one off. Um,
Well, here's one thing I will say, and I get asked this about being a skeptic, and this goes this goes for Allie too, who does Dark Ozarks with me, and the in PSL, that we're believers because of certain things we've experienced in certain places, but any particular place that we go into, we're skeptical about until it proves us otherwise.
sure. All right, so let's get into our. That was great. Thank you so much for sharing all that. So the Spooklight. We always just called it Spooklight, but I know it goes by Hornet Spooklight, the Tri-State Spooklight, the Joplin Spooklight, even though it's not in Joplin. It's not too far away. But so maybe explain to the Other Side Chronicle listeners, like, what is it?
Well, and it kind of reminds me, I several years ago, because I in the course of all of this and doing different TV shows and different events across the country, I talked to different researchers and investigators, and I had someone, because I mentioned, oh, because they were talking about maybe Brown Mountain lights or something. I said, yeah, we've got a pretty infamous go Earth light where I'm from too. And they're like, what in the world is an Earth light? And and basically, if you go back in folklore, you can people can look at will-o'-wisps, which are phosphorus glowing lights that float. Usually, they originally you would see them in cemeteries. in forests, usually in cemeteries, because before embalming, it really was because of the release of gases from graves. And so people would call them cemetery lights, etc. But there's a separate phenomena that really is earth lights that really has nothing to do with that. And the spook light is one of those that they really haven't explained. In any of the major earth lights, they really don't have a good explanation for. Um, the spook light, the original name for it here locally was the Hornet Spook Light because it tended to be seen around a little village, Hornet, Missouri, uh, just this side of the Oklahoma state line. And there's just a few houses that are left now. And that's where it was seen for decades, starting in the 1800s. But, and most people kind of gauge it off of that starting date. But there are accounts that go back a lot further. There are accounts that it was seen by people on the Trail of Tears in the 1830s, by natives as well as soldiers, as well as it figures into Osage and Quapaw lore going back hundreds of years. So we know it's been there a long time. And
the Osage and Quapaw being a couple of the local tribes that
yes,
lived in that area, right? Okay.
Yes,
mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we know it's been there a long time, and certainly before vehicles. And we'll get to sort of the cop-out explanation that usually ends up being said. But so it started way back then, but started being written down in newspapers and things regularly in about the 1880s. And typically, if you've been there, I'm sure your experience is the same. People generally will see a luminescent ball of light, usually described about the size of a basketball. Sometimes it breaks into 2 or 3 lights, balls, and bounces around. Usually it's a whitish color, but I've seen it a bluish color, even a greenish color. And it floats. People have seen it down low to the ground. Sometimes it's higher up near the treetops. People who live along Spooklight Road have found it in their barns, around their houses, and it going through creek beds, etc. So it's not something that, oh, if you stand in this spot and look this direction, you'll see it. It's actually seen over about a 10 square mile area at different times. And so over time, it kind of shifted west a little bit to the Oklahoma side, along what is called 40 Road. And then during the 30s and 40s, it started being investigated seriously by the Army, by the U.S. Corps of Engineers, by several universities, and they couldn't find an explanation for it. And so the default was, well, maybe it is, maybe people are seeing headlights from then Route 66. However, the problem with that is that, one, you would be seeing lights from 15 miles away, not flat terrain. And what we have been able to establish over time, researchers have, there is one condition where you will see those headlights, and that's if you have a specific temperature inversion in the atmosphere. And with that, it's the same condition that creates phenomena like ships floating in the sky over the sea, things like that. And basically, you're seeing something, but because of that, it creates a prism that basically you're seeing it a different spot. It's being projected, basically. And again, if that happens, you see rows of double lights because they're headlights and they're going, single file double lights in a straight line. But that's not what people see with the spook light.
Right.
I mean, people have even had experiences where it's floated through the cab of their car, so, yes, that can happen. But anyone who has experienced the spook light will tell you, I didn't see a row of double lights moving in a straight line. Um, that just doesn't happen. And so then you go back to what else could it be? And there are different theories. If you're looking at more scientific, empirical based theories, some are uh, kind of based on geology. Uh, there is a lot of karst limestone bedrock, and so with a very high crystal content. And so, people say perhaps it's somehow conducting energy because, I mean, crystals are the best and most stable conductors of electricity that we have. That's what we use in satellites, in fact. Or, I mean, there's also been theories put forward that somehow that there is tectonic tension, almost like a fault. But the nearest fault line is the New Madrid fault line on the east side of the state, about almost 400 miles away, and that doesn't really explain it. Then the other main default explanation that is given is it's swamp gas, which kind of goes back to cemetery lights, that you're having decaying matter in a boggy area that releases methane and phosphorus gases that can be luminescent. Now, you've been in that area. There's not really much boggy or marshy land.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not exactly sure where the swamp is that people
Right.
point to, but I've never seen it.
Okay.
But if there were any, that could be a possibility. So there's no real good answer there from a empirical point of view. And then you get into lore, and that gets kind of fun. There
Well,
are
can I just stop you really quick because
uh-huh,
the lore part is so much my favorite part. Um,
uh-huh,
but stick with just the history just for a minute because in my own story, as you know, I'm
uh-huh.
65. When I was a kid, in the 60s, um, it was we would all load up in the station wagon and head out there, um, popcorn, treats, and go out on the road. And isn't some people always didn't they call the road the Devil's Promenade or something too? I've heard for some reason I've
Oh
heard that
no.
somewhere.
Well, but see, that goes into that's a completely different feature that's several miles away. But
Oh, okay.
there are times people have called it that. Just Spooklight Road. It's 50 Road off of State Line Road,
Yeah.
between Newton County, Missouri, and Ottawa County, uh, Oklahoma. And 50 Road became known as Spooklight Road because it then kind of shifted a mile. That's about a mile south from 40 Road. It kind of shifted down there, and as car culture built up after World War II, that's where it would often be seen, and that's where everyone went, and you had Spooky's Museum up,
I
up on
remember
State
that.
Line
I
Road.
remember going in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it was just he owned land there and everyone was out there. So he had this little building and he started selling pop and candy bars and stuff and had different memorabilia that, people had he put up on the walls.
Mhm.
And so it became its own little part of the story.
Mhm.
But, it's, uh, I guess I should say with the Devil's Promenade, part, the Devil's Promenade, is about 3 miles away, and it's actually a cliff over Spring River that was ceremonial land for the Osage and for the Quapaw. And there is a story that goes back hundreds of years. And in fact, when they built when the Quapaw built Downstream Casino, which is actually at the corner, it sits in the corner of Missouri, Oklahoma, and Kansas. Their opening commercial for it paid homage to this story. They showed the Indian chief on top of Devil's Promenade. They didn't show the end of the story. The end of the story is that he got beheaded. And so that story was that chief became the Spooklight.
Carrying the lantern. That was one of my favorite stories.
Yeah. And you have the lantern version that either it's, a miner, which doesn't really make sense because it's not really close enough to mining, or a farmer looking for his lost children. I've even heard trying to transplant tales from a villa that it's, a Civil War soldier that was shot and lost his head, and he's looking for his head. But that really comes from a villa, Missouri, on the other side of the county. So you have all of these. How do you explain those lights? So it's usually a lantern.
And there was also the native story about the couple jumping off the cliff together, right? Their love, something about
not really. There really was. I mean, you would hear a few people say that, but our suicidal Indian princess really didn't happen there. I always love that because the suicidal Indian princess is the most prolific folktale across America that never was. It may have happened someplace back east once, but it is a settler's tale that comes forward. And as settlers came west, you would find, this is an Indian princess spot. And but the stories never started until the European settlers got there.
So going back to the station wagon, we would go out there and pull up on the side of the road. I remember my dad would move around a little bit on the road, and we would see. And I remember hearing from people like, "Oh, I've been out there 3 times and I've never seen it," but for whatever reason, we always saw it. We were lucky to see it, and it did take on different things, but we were able to go out there and pull off on the side of the road. And from what I understand now, it's a lot harder to see it. Correct? Is that
well,
true?
no, and that is one thing, is that you can't park on Spooklight Road anymore. They paved it about 20 years ago, and they took out the shoulders, so there's nowhere to park now. And so the sheriff will run people off if they try to park along there because it is a danger. The crossroad, north south, it's still unpaved. People park there. People will park on 40 Road north, 60 Road south, over by Hornet on the Missouri side. You just can't park on 50 Road anymore. Now, what I have found, and this is one thing that kind of got us to decide to write the Spooklight book, was that one, it is the subject that Dark Ozarks gets asked about the most, and two, since we have done events almost 20 years now, we have seen a trend. So you will talk about, say, you could be anywhere, and there are a number of haunted places that will have floating balls of light. And so at those locations, we tend to, as we are just, talking about those stories, we'll say it'll look similar to the Spooklight. Who here has seen the Spooklight? Over time, fewer hands go up. They tend to be older. And what we are finding is that for most people under about 30, they don't know that the Spooklight was a real thing. And so we're losing our local folklore. And it is kind of unique
Which is
because
part of what you do, what you're doing.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's our purpose.
Yeah.
But and it's kind of interesting though, because the Spooklight became pretty infamous and well known as a, I mean, it existed and these things went on, but how it became a sort of rite of passage for people to go out there and take their kids out there, and then people to go out there as teenagers, etc. That was created as a marketing scheme for the Ozarks, particularly. I don't know if you remember. It started in the 30s. There was a campaign to market the Ozarks because we kind of had the image of the dumb hillbilly.
Mhm.
And so there was a marketing scheme for the land of 1,000 smiles. And so it was all about all smiling people, and lakes, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the tourism board that was responsible for that was based in Joplin, Missouri. And they ended up issuing pamphlets, which are very collectible now, hard to find, about the Spooklight. And local businesses put advertising in there, and it was all like, stop at this restaurant, get your hamburgers, and go out and see the Spooklight. And so what ended up happening is it built the awareness so that it became tradition for people to come in from quite a large area, really, probably a 100-mile radius, to come in and go look for the Spooklight. Which I don't think really happens in a lot of these situations as much, and certainly not as sanctioned. I mean, it literally was, you know, uh, some of those ads were, we have your sack suppers ready when you get here to grab and go.
Mhm.
So it wasn't ever taboo. Where in some places, it was they ran you off and you're not supposed to go out there. Um, and so as a result, it became a rite of passage. And we're losing that because that's not happening near as much. And as a result, younger people either are completely unaware of it, even though they live here, or think, oh, that's just a urban legend.
Right.
There's
Yes, it's
nothing to see.
interesting. I did not know that. I don't know if I don't think I've ever seen a pamphlet. But I always kind of wondered why, because as humans, when whether you agree with it or not, we're always looking for ways to make a buck. And
Hmm.
I'm surprised that other than Spookies, which was this dilapidated place, there wasn't more of a structure out there to make money, for people that were going out there.
Well, and I think in part because it's such a unique phenomena. I've known and talked to a number of people who had land out there along the road, and they're very protective of it, and they're protective of the light in a sense as well, and don't want it exploited, don't want people exploiting it, and so it's almost like uh, them protecting the neighborhood dog. Um, and But I think that has been good in the sense that it it gives that character that you often don't get with some of these stories, particularly of more of the urban legend
Right.
variety.
Right.
And it's unique in the fact that there is something there. It's not just an urban legend. There is something there.
Sure.
We just don't have a really good explanation yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kind of, it's almost the opposite of how I think a lot about the legends and the monsters and the ghosts and the Ozarks, because there's and I'm open. I'm one of these people that's open to whatever. You're going to have to really um, come up with some pretty solid evidence against something for me not to be open to the possibility. But it also I always thought of like whether it's the hills of the Ozarks or Appalachia or wherever, that a lot of these, and there's so many different creatures and ghosts in the that's talked about in the Ozarks. It was also meant to kind of keep the outsiders away in some ways too,
Well,
like keep away from
well,
my still because this thing's here. So it's interesting. It was kind of the opposite of that a little bit with the marketing of the Spooklight.
yeah. Well, I mean, in part, those tall tale ones there, and there are some that, you know, the, that were used as a way of almost making fun of Flatlanders. How wild a tale can I tell? And they believe me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. My dad was so much that way. My dad was an engineer and actually was from central Kansas, but very much in that vein. And he would delight in letting people think that he was the dumb rube. Um, but and that's how a lot of those would come about because Flatlanders would come in and it's like, oh, so naive. Let's see what we can make them believe. But on the other hand, a lot of those stories did have some basis.
Yeah.
The Ozark Howler is a good example. That it started out very early as what is pretty obvious, describing mountain lions and big cats that you would hear howling at night. Then, as the mountain lions as the mountain lion population was decimated, you didn't have that. So, you would get Flatlanders come in and they would ask about the Ozark Howler. So it started being described as almost this bear creature with goat horns and shaggy hair and sometimes even tree branches for horns, tall tale.
Mhm.
And ironically, the Ozark Howlers kind of had a resurgence in the internet age. And now it's almost a Sasquatch kind of
Right.
entity. And people have basically, it's not the urban legend now, but people are creating urban legends about uh, how the howler interacted with famous people in the past, things like that.
Yeah.
So things come around,
Sure.
but yeah, there's a lot of those stories had a grain of truth at some point, but some of them just were, let's see what we can make those Flatlanders believe.
So I just looked at the time and I knew exactly what was going to happen today. I knew it. Um, so um, first of all, um, thank you so much
Oh, I had a blast.
for being here. It was I thought I knew everything about the Spooklight, but obviously I don't. Um, and I would love to have you back sometime
Be
to talk
happy.
about
Be
some of
happy
these
to.
other subjects, and we can talk about this later. But I'm going to be down in the hills in the first weeks of March, so maybe we
So,
could hook up and do a remote show from some
oh,
spooky spot. So,
absolutely.
and everyone out there, on the when this comes out on the YouTube channel, I'm going to put all of Lisa's links and information there, so you can pick up one of her books or tune into one of her podcasts. Which would I know I'm sure after watching this you're going to be super interested in, and there's going to be a lot more of this kind of thing, including lots of that one thing, Lisa, about where I live. There's these all these dark forests and weird places. You don't have to go too far from Seattle to get into some really dark places and that's kind of why the Bigfoot has been such a big deal here, is because there's the
Mhm.
possibility, there's just so much unknown places here that people just don't live in. You could go for so far and just not see anyone, but so it's kind of a
Well, and
it's
there's
so
actually quite a few places here
Yeah.
still that way. And there are quite a few Bigfoot uh, tales.
Yeah. So thank you so much again. I appreciate it. And we will see you soon.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Lisa.
Okay.
All right. Bye, everybody. We'll see you next time.